This is a solo master empire hunt, and I can run around like a headless chicken, melting all adds in my path, melting all champions in my path, and melting all bosses, and well, being able to just buff my Gjallarhorn and Trace Rifle to a whole new level. Now, Trace Rifle, question mark? Yup. Now hold on a sec, let's rewind. This is the Retraced Path Trace Rifle, and this is the Path of the Burning Steppes. Now you put both together and we have the Retraced Path of the Burning Steppes, and let me tell you guys, it burns. It burns so much we get not one buff, not two buffs, not three, not four, not five, but 6 different sources of damage increase to make this Gjallarhorn obliterate everything in its path, and having a Trace Rifle clearing all adds. There are also some other benefits to this build like instant health regeneration, empowering abilities, and a few other things. If this sounds like the build for you, then stay tuned and I'll see you all on the other side. Now this video is sponsored by Awea. If you're looking to buff your silver gains, be sure to visit them below and use my code DIVIDE when checking out. Now guys, let's burn stuff. Now during this video, the background gameplay will be a mixture of a few different things from Master Empire hunts, Legend sectors, and a bunch of other stuff to show you where and how you should be using this build in endgame PvE. If you like this one, you may like some of my other builds, you can view that full playlist below for more. But now with this build, I'm calling it the Retraced Path of the Burning Steppes, as it's primarily focused to enhance ad clearing using a new Trace Rifle, but at the same time, we'll be buffing our Gjallarhorn too. Now I know what you guys are thinking, Trace Rifles aren't that great in endgame PvE. Now that's right and wrong. They're not great because we don't have champion mods for them, making it pretty pointless, but at the same time, when buffed, this thing wrecks everything. You might be wondering how we're going to stop champions. Well, this build will cover all that, but firstly, let's jump into the example of how this build will work. So you'll run up to a bunch of adds, throw a grenade to kill them. This will spawn a solar elemental well, 2 if you have a bunch of them, and then picking up that well will give you a solar weapon damage increase, as well as roaring flames times 1. You'll then move on to killing adds with your solar trace rifle that has a frenzy perk and subsistence for essentially infinite ammo. Then you'll use a combination of your abilities and solar weapons to buff those stacks further and further to the point where you're maxed out completely and almost insta killing everything. Now let me hold you there for a second to get your heads around the buffs, but before I do, I want to point out 2 important things. Firstly, like all builds, you're not invincible. You'll still die quickly, but you'll also be able to kill quicker. So this build will of course be more effective and easier to use in easier content, but it's still pretty decent in harder content, as shown in some of these examples. Secondly, your god rule for the Retraced Path to make this build insane is Subsistence and Demolitionist, but Frenzy works great too, like I've got. There is a card on screen now if you want a full weapon god rule breakdown of the new Retraced Path weapon. If you got sub and demo with a maxed out discipline stat in place, you're going to master this build. It's as simple as that. The idea of this build is to spam abilities and kill everything with a Trace Rifle while making your solar power weapon as strong as possible, whether that's the Gjallarhorn or a 1000 Voices. Now about those buffs, you're going to be getting the following buffs: Frenzy, solar weapon damage increase, Roaring Flames, Firewalker, minor spec mod, and Withering Heat, which are for champions. Now Frenzy, if you don't have Demolitionist, you'll grant a Trace Rifle a 15% damage increase. On top of this, when you pick up Solar Elemental Wells, you'll get an additional 25% damage increase. Then with the Firewalker buff, you'll get another 35% at max stacks, along with a 7.8% minor spec mod. And then if you're damaging a debuff champion, you'll get another 30% from the Withering Heat. So in simple form, the amount of DPS increase your Trace Rifle will have against a champion is 172%, and the amount of DPS your Gjallarhorn will have against a champion is 119.4%, which is still way over double. And that being said, you don't have to use those exact weapons, any solar weapons will do the trick. Now going over the setup of the build, starting with the loadout, you can use any kinetic primary weapon of your choice, but I'd recommend using a weapon based on the activity you're playing, so going with something like an overload bow or an anti-barrier auto rifle may be ideal. For your energy weapon, we're going to be using a Retraced Path Trace Rifle. Now you don't have to use this, but the build is based around that, so I strongly recommend it. But any solo weapon will still work with this build. Now the weapon rolls you want with this Trace Rifle for PvE are Subsistence and Demolitionist, ideally to maximise the build's potential, but Frenzy is also good for the extra damage, which is the one I'm using. Now going into Master and Grandmaster content, you really got to decide if Demolitionist is really worth using for you over Frenzy, because the DPS may be more important than spamming grenades that you might end up missing, but honestly, both should do the job just fine, which is to ad clear as fast as possible. As for your heavy weapon, you'll want to use a good solar one. either Gjallarhorn or 1k Voices will do the trick just fine, but all the potential heavy weapons you can use with this build are Gjallarhorn, the Lament, Eyes of Tomorrow, Whisper of the Worm, Sleeper Simulant, 1000 Voices, Ascendancy, Cojuelo, Hazen Vengeance, Corsair's Wrath, Eternity's Edge, and Negative Space. If you really want to use a grenade launcher, Outrageous Fortune isn't a bad choice. Now you get the Trace Rifle from the chest at Eternity, and you get the Gjallarhorn from the new dungeon on the Cosmodrome. Now moving into the subclass, you'll want to use the Middle Tree Sunbreaker Burning Maul, which comes with a throw-in hammer, which you can use against adds and champions, and kills with our solar abilities will increase the damage they do. We also get Tireless Warrior, where picking up that hammer after a successful hit will trigger our health regeneration. Now throw in a fusion grenade so you can explode adds to help generate elemental wells, and with this whole setup, you'll be chaining between your grenade and melee quite a lot, and you'll be using that throw-in hammer with Thermoclastic Strike, which will stop your overload champions, as well as weakening them, making our Gjallarhorn one-shot kill master champions, which is stupidly insane. Now for our exotic armor, we're going to be using the Path of the Burning Steps. This exotic counts as an empowering buff, so it won't stack with charger-like mods or other active buffs like a bubble. Now this reads, Solar Final Blows periodically grant you an escalating bonus to weapon damage, you are harder to slow or freeze with stasis when you break out, and you take no damage from doing so, creating a blast of solar energy around yourself. You can use this build except for Elemental Wells part inside of PvP too. So the mods we have, starting with the helmet, will be 2 rocket launcher ammo finder mods, or whichever ammo finder you need for your heavy weapon, and then with this we'll have Font of Might, where picking up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type grants a temporary bonus to weapon damage of that same element, and you'll get this buff quite frequently as we will have a ton of different ways to generate those wells, which is also why you want to run solar weapons in a solar subclass. Now for our gauntlets we have elemental armaments, where combatant weapon final blows with a damage type that matches our subclass element have an escalating chance to spawn an elemental well. So spraying enemies down with our trace rifle should often give us an elemental well to then buff that damage for 10 seconds. If you're worried about running out of ammo and you'd rather use this more than your heavy weapon, then you could put on a heavy solar machine gun like here apparent and run trace rifle mods to maximise your ammo gains for the retrace path. But you don't want to always use the trace rifle for 100% uptime because it's a special weapon and you will end up tearing through ammo quite quickly. Now in the gauntlets we also have a champion mods that you may need, so do just that and stop them on. And then with the chest armour we're running elemental ordnance. Defeating a combatant with a grenade spawns another elemental well that matches our subclass energy type. This goes really well with the Trace Rifle's Demolitionist perk if you got one, because you can keep spamming those grenades while also getting ammo straight back into the mag. But alongside that mod, we do have Concussive Dampener to resist incoming AoE damage, and our ammo reserve mod. Now in the leg armor, we are using Explosive Wellmaker to spawn elemental wells with explosive kills. That will be from our grenades and rocket launcher. And with this, we also have our cooldown mod for our grenade, and again, that scavenger mod for your heavy weapon. Lastly in the class, we're using Thermoclastic Strike, which is again to stun those overloads, and then Withering Heat to weaken them. And because after throwing a hammer, you can pick it straight back up, you can weaken every single champion, and you'll always have the 30% debuff on them. Now if you're running a sword like the Lament, then you'll want to swap this out to Passive Guard for more survivability, but really the choice is yours and doesn't really matter that much. Now for the stats, I'd max out Discipline if you don't have a Demolitionist rune on your weapon, otherwise go with Recovery and Resilience. But lastly, here is your artifact setup for this build, if you are wanting to see this. Now this video was quite longer than I wanted it to be, as I usually make these videos around 3 to 6 minutes long, but hopefully you guys found something useful out of this. But this build is pretty effective in all types of PvE content, including the endgame. But remember, it'll be harder to maintain in harder content, and you will have to play the slower game rather than rushing in all the time. Now if you liked this build, you may also like some of my other ones. You can view that full playlist down below, but that is all for this one, and until next time, go burn some overloads.